my study was to find out, well, what steps were involved. And we have continued with our rehabilitation and rewilding work here in Namibia for the last, 15 to 20 years, where we end up getting orphan cats in. And if you have to bottle raise them, they're not a good candidate. But if you get them in at about, 6 months of age and raise them up, they hate you at that point in time. You can keep them, as you know, we have very far away, away from people areas where we can raise these animals up.
This is Life's Tough. Explorers are tougher, and I'm your host, Richard Wiese. Scratch the surface of an explorer and you'll find an adventure and a great story. This show is about their tales. This podcast is a proud supporter of the Explorers Club and the EC50 initiative, 50 people changing the world that the world needs to know about. For more information, go to explorers.org. Today, we're going to take a voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to the southwest coast of Africa, to Namibia, a country with the biggest sand dunes in the world and also the fastest land animal, the cheetah. Our guest is Dr. Laurie Marker, who is widely considered the foremost expert of these remarkable animals. Laurie, welcome to Life's Tough, but Explorers are Tougher.
Nice to see you. Great to be with you.
Nice to see you as well. And before we get into cheetahs, I want to relate a story that I don't think I've ever told to you. When I first came to visit you in Namibia, I landed in a small plane with a film crew, and it had just rained and the sun was coming out, and there was this wonderful smell in the air. And I've since looked over that phenomena that people might experience after an April rain in the spring in the United States. And it's a Greek term called petrichor. And it's actually from these microorganisms in plants exuding certain types of oils that give it a really fragrant smell. But I have to say that in Namibia, the smell was just so much purer than I'd ever experienced before. So that's sometimes what I think about when I think of Namibia.
It's a great smell, absolutely. We're just having rains now that have just started. And I have to fully agree with you that just that smell, I've never smelled it anywhere else as well. So we all here in Namibia love that smell. We all say, oh, it's the smell of rain. So how nice to know that.
Yeah, it's always good to know there's a term to describe even the most simplest of human experiences. For people who've never been to Namibia, can you describe the country and what is often called cheetah land? What is the country of Namibia in which they live in?
Well, Namibia is a very large country, and it's about 2.5 times the size of California. But we are a very arid country. So we go from a very long coastline where, again, there are the highest dunes and the oldest deserts, inland where we're about 5 hours inland from the coast. And this is cheetah country. And cheetah country has thorn bushes here. We've got open savanna land and lots and lots of wildlife. About 80% of all of our wildlife is found outside of game reserves. Of course, our largest game reserve in the country is the Etosha National Park. And yet there are very few cheetahs there. Most all of the cheetahs are found outside of the protected areas on these farmlands, ranch lands, where people ranch livestock, goats, sheep, cattle. And also it's integrated. So there's a lot of wildlife on the land where the livestock is as well. And there are cheetahs. 90% of the cheetahs are here where there are farmers.
You know, you mentioned farms. And to me, having visited your facility, which I have to say is one of the most cutting edge research facilities, but yet you have borrowed ancient wisdom from perhaps the Egyptians, where they took guard dogs and had them bond with herds of goats or sheep or whatever they did and protected them. This is something that may seem simple, but I think you've got to be the person who's really introduced it in the protection of cheetahs.
Right. Now, I started this program here about 25 years ago. And when I was prior to being here, so I've been in Namibia over 30 years now. In America, in Oregon, actually, we're using these dogs. They are livestock guarding dogs. The breed that we use is a Turkish breed. and it's called an Anatolian Shepherd or a Kangal dog. And they have been used for over 5,000 years to protect livestock. So they're absolutely amazing. They grow up with the goats or sheep or cattle, and then they protect them. And they protect them by barking loudly, marking territory. They live with the flock. They're actually very incredible dogs, very smart, independent thinkers. So we've now started that program, as I said, 25 years ago, and we've bred and placed over 700 dogs. So we donate them pretty much to the farmers, and then we work with the farmers for the dog's entire life. And so we've got a lot of farmers that we're friends with. We've got about 150 dogs out working right now. And we had our last litter of puppies just a couple days before Christmas. So we've got puppies on the ground right now as well.
I've seen those puppies. They're very cute. I mean, if you want to ascribe, I know you're a wildlife biologist, and the word cute isn't always something you like to use. And I thought about getting one of those dogs, and I thought, wow, what a great dog to have with my family. However, when I visited Turkey, where they are house dogs, I've discovered a couple things. They bark very loudly and very often. And I think that if you would have those in the United States and had any neighbors within any kind of distance, you probably would not be a good neighbor.
You wouldn't. They're loud. Their bark is very, very loud, and they don't listen to you. They have, as I said, an independent thinking, and they do what they think is best. They think we are maybe a little bit smarter than their goats and sheep, but really we are not a very smart species to them. They have their own reasons for doing things. And if you've been raised by them or you raise them with you, they think that their job is to protect you as well. So anything that they're raised with, they will protect. They're pretty nice dogs, but they also need very large spaces to live in and roam in. So these dogs are used to covering, miles and miles every day, not to kind of be in your backyard. So they don't make a good pet. And that's why they've actually been, they're a rare breed as well, because there aren't that many of them. Because the herding and livestock out on the lands is something that has become reduced more and more as we've gone more into commercialized ways of taking care of our animals. Here in Africa, though, we do still have a lot of, movement of our animals, lots of open spaces. And that's why the dog works so well here. They move with the flocks every day and then come in the evenings. And then they're also very, very loud at night, because that's when most of the predators are active. So people don't really understand that. They think, the livestock comes in and they all go to sleep. Well, they do, but the dog never sleeps. It is always alert. And if there's predators around, they bark, and then there's an avoidance that goes on. That predators then realize that there is something very big there, that they don't want to get hurt. That's also another misconception, that people think that predators want to eat your livestock, and they really don't. What a predator wants is a quick, easy meal. And if your livestock is not protected or managed properly, then a predator gets it. And then the predator usually it's responsible. It's called a problem animal. However, I try to bring it back to the farmers, that the farmers actually play a role in the loss of their livestock. And then, of course, they always blame the cheetah. And I explain to them that it's not the cheetah's fault. You put your livestock out and could lose it to like a cheetah if you don't manage it properly. And so that's why the dogs work so well.
Our mission is to empower the next generation of explorers. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and have them join the expedition. Laurie, I've always been so impressed by how farmers treat you either as an equal or a certain degree of reverence. So you're originally from California. You grew up in California. Now you're in Namibia, which is not your home country. How is it that farmers bought into using that versus using poisons or shooting them? It seems like that you've been widely accepted, at least your views and your practices. What has made that difference?
Well, I think when I came here first, and I first arrived in Namibia in actually the middle 1970s, and I think what I wanted to know was everything about how the farmers were farming and how why they hated cheetahs and why they were killing so many cheetahs. So in the 1970s and 80s, the farmers were killing like 800 to 900 cheetahs a year here in Namibia. And then when I moved here in 1990, I went door to door working with the farmers. Now, I grew up on a small farm. So I had horses. I still ride my horse every single day, and have always had goats. And I had a dairy goat farm, and I was actually a goat judge. So when you can talk to farmers about that, they can relate. I'm not only am a good biologist, but I'm a good livestock manager, and I love my livestock. And with that, I don't want predators eating my livestock. And that's what I tried to explain to them. And I think a lot of people who are carnivore biologists really are not farmers. And if you do like your livestock, you can understand why farmers get angry, I guess, at predators. And that's why, again, I've been able to put it around to say, well, it's not really the predator's problem. It's your problem. You are playing a role in this. And the farmers have understood. The more I learned from them about their management systems and their movement of the wildlife through their lands and the movement of cheetahs and other predators around, I got the farmers' hands on the cheetahs as well and got them involved in the research we were doing. So if they caught a cheetah and they called it a problem animal, I'd go and pick it up. Oftentimes I'd anesthetize it there at their farm and get their hands on the animal. They'd help me collect blood. I'd let them listen to the heartbeat of the cheetah. And next thing you knew, that they started to become my collaborators, I think I would say. I wanted to know everything there was about the cheetah. And when I started in the early 90s, really nothing was even known about a wild cheetah. So as they started learning more, putting radio collars on the cheetahs and tracking them, they started learning more about how the cheetahs were living. And I think that, again, in getting the farmers involved, they became vested in my love of this animal. And from that, they learned through my eyes that the cheetah wasn't maybe necessarily their enemy, that they could actually learn to live with it.
But it seems that as much as you study cheetahs and even their personalities, it seems that there is some sort of life lesson that you've learned about human psychology, because I've seen how your graduate students react to you and sort of the comfort and respect they work with you. So what do you think the lesson of human psychology that you learned from working with farmers and also taking young, brilliant scientists and trying to make them also very much human?
Well, I think it is. I think so often, people go into wildlife work or animal work because maybe they don't necessarily like people as much. And, people are a problem, but they're also a solution. And I'm very interested in people. I'm interested in where they come from, how they tick, what makes them be who they are. And from that, I think you can start learning a lot more about working together with them. So I've, worked with some of the toughest farmers there are in this country. Why are they tough and who are they? And, they become friends. And I think that's the personal side of things. And my graduate students, I love all my students that I've worked with. And I think in the last 30 years, I've had over 1,000 students, which we've added up because we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary. And that's just amazing. And I'm in contact with still so many of them and watching them grow up and giving them advice. But I think what they've learned here is they've learned how to work with people and how to share our care about the animals with the people that we are dealing with in their life. They've learned that people are a part of conservation.
You are often referred to as the Jane Goodall of cheetahs, which I would think would be a compliment. So that's a big step between somebody growing up in California and sort of ascending that. What was that moment that got you on your trail to Namibia and cheetahs?
Well, let me see. I ran a wildlife park in Oregon, and I was in charge of cheetahs. And I had a cheetah named Kayam who got me here to Namibia. And this was again in the middle 70s. And my job was to find out if a cheetah born in captivity could learn how to hunt and what steps were involved. And that's why I was here in Namibia to begin with. And so I learned a lot from her. I did teach her how to hunt, and that's what I learned, that farmers were killing so many cheetahs, and kept coming back and traveling throughout a lot of the cheetah range countries, trying to find out where the best place might be to try to help save the cheetah. And then at that time in the 70s, I was writing to everybody in the world, the WWFs and any conservation organization and governments. I was knocking on the US government's door saying, who can try to help save cheetahs? And nobody came around to help. And everyone said, there's nothing going on with cheetahs. And that's when I think I decided. Khayyam had passed away. And after we'd been together for her entire life, I thought that somebody needed to do something. And I call that the they factor, that they will take care of it, but there is no they. So you have to become a they. And that's when I set up the Cheetah Conservation Fund and decided that I was going to come over to Namibia and figure out a way to help save the cheetah. So it's grown, obviously, over a 30-year period of time, but there was an aha moment. And that was really after realizing that there was no they. And I actually have one of the livestock guarding dogs right here with me.
For people who are listening to this, I'm watching Laurie tilt down her camera. And if you've never seen a Turkish Kangal, look it up. They have the most sympathetic, lovely face. And this dog is sort of underneath her arm I can see the tail wagging. And thank goodness this dog is not barking. Otherwise, this podcast would not continue. Laurie, the accepted wisdom with large cats, for example, lions, is that once a lion is in captivity, it could never be released. What made you think that you could do that with cheetahs?
Well, again, this goes back to, in the early 70s when the zoos just started collaborating together and the stop of any animals coming from the wild with the CITES and the Endangered Species Act. And from that, we needed to find out if indeed you could breed animals in captivity and maintain genetic diversity. And then from that, what steps would be involved in putting an animal back out into the wild. Of course, with an animal that's big like a lion or a tiger or even a leopard, as they become habituated towards people, they lose their fear. And so one of the biggest things, primarily for these very large animals, and possibly more dangerous, is that they could find people and they have no fear of people, and it would be more dangerous for people. Cheetahs are similar, and so hand-raised cheetahs would not be a recommended animal to go back out into the wild. But cheetahs are the smallest of the big cats, and they're not, dangerous to humans. And so we knew that if we, my study was to find out, what steps were involved. And we have continued with our rehabilitation and rewilding work here in Namibia for the last, 15 to 20 years, where we end up getting orphan cats in. And if you have to bottle raise them, they're not a good candidate. But if you get them in at about, 6 months of age and raise them up, they hate you at that point in time. You can keep them, as you know, we have very far away, away from people areas where we can raise these animals up. We've been able to grow them up and actually put them back out into the wild, and they stay away from people. So that's really the biggest thing, is that you need enough area, you need to be kind of away from people, and then there is the danger of the human. We can't put animals out that could hurt people. But oftentimes these animals really want to stay away from people. We've seen that a lot with leopards as well. They kind of hate people a lot. And that's the kind of animal that could be rewilded or go back out into the wild.
Laura, I noticed that you were in the news recently that the whole notion of reintroducing cheetahs to India is something that you're very serious about. I know that you had tried conversations with the country of Iran, reintroducing cheetahs to there. Where are you on either of those projects?
Well, Iran, we were never looking at reintroducing. What we were trying to do is to save the last of the 50 cheetahs that are there. And we are still active in our communications with our Iranian colleagues as well. But in India, we've been working there for now about 25 years. But over the last decade, it's become clear that the government does want to move forward with it. And this past year, the Indian government did put a ruling out where they have a committee and they are looking at places to put cheetahs back out into the wild. I think it was about maybe 8 years ago, I actually did a recce into one of the areas that they're looking at. And it's come forward again that this reserve is a potential for rewilding of cheetahs. I've done this in a few different countries. One was Zambia, and they've just released cats back into that area where I'd made the recommendation of how to. I've looked at places like Uzbekistan, but now this project with, I think, India, I would say in the next couple of years may come forward. And we still need to find cats that could go. And some of the cheetahs that we've done our rewilding work with here are in a reserve called Arindi Ranch, which is about 3 hours from where we are. And we've now been able to actually grow a nice population there of animals that have been rehabilitated as well and are now breeding. And so again, we're trying to find the right animals that could go there and do the best for India. So we're just consulting, and they've got a great team there that I've worked with, as I said, for about a decade. And they are serious about this. The cheetah's been extinct in India since the early 1950s. Here they've got lions and tigers. Of course, they've got bears. And the cheetah is one of the few animals that has gone extinct. And they really do want to bring it back. Of course, it had been revered for, hundreds of years by the Maharajas there. They are one of the most amazing animals in the world. And it would be just incredible to see the cheetah living back in India again. I mean, rehabilitation is very, very difficult. It's much easier to try to take care of the animals where they are, and bringing an animal back into its past habitat is a huge job that does take the government, the best biologists, and collaborators to ever make something like this work.
Laurie, one of the things, again, maybe it's human psychology, that I'm always so amazed about you is you live two lives. You live the life of a hardcore in the dirt farmer, rancher, a researcher. I mean, that's your DNA. Yet half the year, I see that you go from fundraiser to fundraiser to fundraiser. And some of these are very fancy. I know that you've been greeted by heads of state, by movie stars, all those things. How do you reconcile those two worlds from a psychological standpoint? Because let's face it, being at home in Namibia is a lot different than being in Hollywood talking to stars about saving cheetah. What keeps you grounded, and how do you do it?
Well, fortunately, it's not a full half of the year, but it's about a quarter of the year that I have to travel. And I think that the people are interested in the stories I can tell. And yeah, the dirt is good. I love dirt. So, I mean, I love our dirt here and in every country that I visit, which is a cheetah range country. I feel it. And I can share that, I think, with the people who I meet and are interested in the story, I think, that I have to tell, and the fact that we can actually make a difference to save this species. It is, it's just interesting, I guess, to go back and forth. These days I'm going back and forth up into Somaliland as well, which is a much harsher environment than that of Namibia here. Also a desert, but that's where there's a lot of illegal wildlife trade going on with cheetahs. And we're working really hard right now to try to stop this illegal trade. And there we're dealing with, lawmakers and going from nomads and pastoralists, which are just amazing on the ground with their camels, trying to explain to them that they need to stop catching cheetahs and leave them be. I don't know. I just like talking to people, and if they are interested in cheetahs, I think they're interested. So
you're an incredible optimist, because if one were to sit down and really think about it, you look at the environment, how the numbers have declined with cheetah, there's reason not to get out of bed. And so what is it that keeps you going, or keeps you this eternal optimist?
Well, nature is resilient, and we as people can make a difference. And if we don't keep trying, we're going to lose the cheetah. There's less than 7,500 cheetahs left in the world today, which is not enough. And we have to. I have to keep everybody going, because I know that we can save the cheetah. We've got plans throughout the cheetah ranges. I've trained people in all the different cheetah range countries, where there are 23 range countries. And I know that if I can keep them stimulated and going, and they all know that I'm there for them at any point in time, that we can save the species, but it's going to still take a lot of work and a lot of time. And as you know, our motto is, change the world to save the cheetah. So the world has to change for the cheetah to survive.
Was there any role model you had growing up? Who was that person that you really looked up to and said, wow, I really admire that person?
Oh my. Well, I'm sure I had many, but I've always, loved Jane Goodall. She's of course wonderful. When I was growing up, I grew up on the back of a horse. So I always remember, though, my parents saying to me, if you don't take care of your animals, they're going to go away. And if anyone, that means, I was out cleaning my stalls and feeding my dogs and feeding my horse. It wasn't my parents. And I think that stuck with me more than anything. If you don't take care of it, it's going to go away. And I always said to my parents, you'll never take my horse away from me or my dog or cat. And now I feel the same way about our world's wildlife. If we don't take care of it, it's going, and we're watching it go. We're losing species at such a rate that, again, we can make a difference. So I think maybe that's one of the big things that has kind of kept me going along this line.
A lot of people are asking for donations, money, and you want to make sure that if you're giving a donation, that it's well spent. How can people help the Cheetah Conservation Fund? How can they make a difference with cheetahs?
Well, we'd love people to go to our website, which is cheetah.org.
Okay. I think of you, I think of Cheetah Conservation Fund, and I think the world is a better place for having someone like Laurie Marker in it. And as a friend and also as someone in that profession, I'd like to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's always wonderful to talk with you. And I hope people do go to our website, which is cheetah.org. So, please join us and learn more about the cheetah and what we can do to not only save the cheetah, but an entire ecosystem in large landscapes and work with people.
Dr. Laurie Marker, thank you so much for being on Life's Tough, but Explorers Are Tougher. I hope you enjoyed our podcast. Now we have a little favor to ask. We'd really appreciate your support, so make sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. See you out on the trail.